Interview?
Yes.
Okay, you're just seeing the first slide, not the next slide too?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll get going, and the two attendees will have a specialized training for them. So hi, I'm Stacey Klim. This is Foster Care Education 101. This is my little family. I am also a former foster parent. And so that's a daughter in the middle. And we were blessed and lucky enough to adopt her out of foster care. And then Jackson in the wheelchair is our biological son who was born with disabilities. So we are a different kind of looking American family, but it's kind of normal to us. All right, this is our vision, mission, values, and equity statement from OSPI. And just in case, I always just assume people know what OSPI is, but OSPI is our state education agency. It stands for the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. And so our vision is all students are prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. And I can send these slides to Luann later if you want to read more about our mission, values, and equity statement. I also think it's really important to recognize the land that we are working and living on. And for me, I just want to make sure to acknowledge the indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still inhabit the area today. And in my situation of where I live and work, that is the Squaxin Island tribe. And that is a picture of the Squaxin Island tribe logo. And that top picture is our office building, the OSPI office building, which is the old state capitol. It's the first state capitol. And fun fact, Teddy Roosevelt stood on those front steps and gave a speech once. So it's a pretty cool, historic old building. And if you ever want to come visit, you let me know. All right, I know that we're recording, so maybe just put in the chat, are you a foster parent or a kinship parent? That'll kind of help me decide how to talk about some of the things we're going to talk about today. I'll give it a minute. Okay, got an idea of who everyone else. All right, let's move on. I'm not going to read who people were, just so you know. I'm going to start off with this quote because I think it's really important, and I don't think a lot of people understand that children in foster care experience much higher levels of residential and school instability than their peers, and they're more likely to face a variety of academic difficulties. What you need to remember as both a foster parent, kinship parent, advocate, that every research shows that every time these children move schools, they lose between 4 to 6 months of academic progress. So if students are moved from school to school every year and they're going to 2 or 3 schools, every time they're losing 4 to 6 months of academic progress. And that is setting them further and further behind. And so that is why they're likely to face a variety of academic difficulties. And I'll be sharing a little data later, which is very difficult to look at for our students. So I'm just going to start real quick. We're going to go over some of the laws and provisions around foster care. And I really think this is important. I know law can get a little bit boring sometimes, and there's a lot of gray area. But as a former foster parent, I will tell you, I wish someone would have told me this because I had no idea. And it would have been so much more beneficial to the kiddos that came through my home. So first, I'm going to start with students who qualify as foster care. In our state, our definition is a little bit different than the federal definition. But in our state, we use that language, subject of a dependency proceeding. So that means they could live in a foster home or residential facility. They may live with a relative, and the relative one is where it could kind of go either way. They could be living with a relative and be in foster care because there's a dependency proceeding, or they could be just a kinship provider. If a student is with a kinship provider, then they're not in foster care unless there's a dependency proceeding. So that's just something to remember as you navigate this world. They could be in a group home, emergency shelter. An emergency shelter isn't like a homeless shelter. It's a shelter that's run by DCYF. And because in that way they're paid and they're contracted with DCYF. So that is the type of emergency shelter. And they could be in a pre-adoptive home or they could be in a trial return home. So sometimes kids go back to their parents for 6 months while DCYF makes sure everything's going well and students are stable. And when they're in that trial return home, they're still in foster care. And this does include our tribal child welfare students and our unaccompanied refugee minors. So there are 3 main pieces of law around our students in foster care that are really important. That first one was in 2008. And in 2008, the federal government said, hey, we're starting to notice these kids in foster care are not doing well. And we think that's child welfare's problem. They need to start making sure that these kiddos have some kind of educational stability. And so we're going to create this Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act and make sure child welfare is doing everything they can to make sure kids are successful in school. And child welfare came back and said, you know, this is great. We'd love to be able to do this, but we can't do it because schools won't share their student information with us. They won't give us the education records. They say it's protected. And so in 2013, the federal government came out with the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, which was kind of an amendment to FERPA that said, hey, students in foster care have educational records that need to go to child welfare. And so that way that exchange of records could start to happen. But then in 2015, someone said, hey, you know what? This isn't just child welfare's problem. It's also our schools because they need to make sure that our students are having educational stability too. They need to be together in this endeavor to make sure our students are successful. And so in 2015, which almost 10 years ago, we had the Every Student Succeeds Act. And we're going to kind of go through some of those provisions today. So this is federal education law. Washington has also taken all of these pieces of law and put them into Washington state law. And these are provisions that all schools must follow. So we're going to go through each one of these 4 main key pieces. The first one is every school district is required to designate a foster care liaison. And when I send this, I'll send this PowerPoint to Luann. I think I said that already. When you get it, you could click on all of these links and they should work. So if you want to read the law more in depth or whatever links I have sent, resources, you can click on those and those should work. These are some of the jobs the foster care liaison needs to do. And quite a few of them are really the main pieces of their job. And one of those is that ensure that children in foster care are enrolled in and attending school. They are the primary contact person for child welfare. They manage best interest determinations. You may think in your head, what is a best interest determination? You're going to find out because that is a really, really important piece. If you're a foster parent, this process has to happen. They make sure that those enrollment and records are immediately transferred, students are immediately enrolled, and they do a bunch of other things like transportation coordination. They have to have training, and then they make sure every school building point of contact is identified and coordinates with them. What is a building point of contact? Few years ago, Washington decided, hey, that school district foster care liaison is at that district office, and that's amazing, and they're doing amazing work. But what about the fact that no one at the school has eyes on these kids and really could be a good contact for these kids? And so they came up with a new law of every K-12 public school building has to have a building point of contact who is kind of that contact person at the school for students in foster care, and they work with the foster care liaison at the school district level. So that's what that is. Why is it important? What do they do? Well, each week they should be communicating with that foster care liaison about the students in foster care. They should make sure that they're going to school. Anytime there's an issue, if it's a discipline issue, if it's, they need a new coat, whatever the situation is, they can be reaching out to that foster care liaison and coordinating with them to make sure that the student is getting what they need. They'll probably check with nutrition services because when students go in foster care, they get free lunch, free meals. So they'll be making sure that is happening. If you're a foster parent or even a kinship parent, sorry, I'll take the back. If you're a foster parent, you do not have to fill out a free and reduced lunch form. So if you go in and you're at the school and someone says, oh, so-and-so lives with you now, you're the foster parent, you need to fill out the free and reduced lunch form. No, you do not. There's a process to make sure that happens. It's not based on your income. It's based on the fact that the student is in foster care. Fees and fines. This is something else the building point of contact should be helping with. If a student comes into your care and they have a $20 library fee, you're not responsible for that. If they get a $20 library fee or a fine or something while they're in your care, DCYF is responsible for those. So you should make sure that the social worker knows those fees and fines are paid by DCYF, and that's something the building point of contact may have information on, and they can either share it with the foster parent or caregiver or let the liaison know. The big thing is that they should be connecting with the student and building a relationship with them. I know I had a few foster care kiddos who just didn't want anyone to know that they were in foster care, and I don't blame them. That's a hard thing for a kid to wrap his head around or her head around. And so they need to have someone in that building that they know, that they trust, and who understands what's happening with them, that they're in foster care. And that's kind of the whole point of the building point of contact, is to build that relationship with them. And then another thing that happens a lot is our kids who go into foster care sometimes aren't able to continue to do the things that they were doing before, especially if they're older. Maybe they're in football. And sometimes foster parents say, I just don't have the capacity to take you to and from practice or take you to games, so you're not going to be able to do that anymore. Or they're getting ready to go off to college and no one has helped them with their college documents to, apply for financial aid or whatever it is. And that's kind of the point of the building point of contact, is kind of troubleshoot those issues to make sure that that student still has those stability pieces. So that's a little bit about the building point of contact. You're probably thinking in your head, how do I find them? Oh, don't worry, I have that taken care of for you. We have it on our website. You just go to our website, you type in the school district, and you'll be able to find your foster care liaison. Or you could go to the building point of contact page and you could type in the school, or you could type in the school district, and you'll be able to find out who those people are. I'm going to do one little piece about the building points of contact. It's a new law. I think it was last year, I started having school districts tell me who these people are. I have gotten emails from some of them saying, I don't even know what this is. Someone told me I'm a building point of contact. What am I supposed to do? There's a few thousand of them. I'm not going to always be able to train every single one of them. There's turnover. There's, kind of a high turnover every year. So keep that in mind. If you do find out who your foster care building point of contact is, you may have more information about what they're supposed to be doing than they do. So make sure you tell them. They may not know. You can send them to me. We do send them a welcome letter every time we get a new one so that they have an idea, but it's still a new rule they're all trying to figure out. All right, the next piece is that students remain in the school of origin unless there's a determination that it is not in their best interest. School of origin is huge. School of origin is the school in which the student is enrolled at the time of a placement change. And that could mean when they go into foster care, it could mean when they move to a different home during foster care. They have a right to stay in that school of origin. That is their school, that is their stability, and they have a right to stay there. So if someone, like a caseworker at DCYF, says, hey, you're getting a new kid, Just unenroll them from their old school and put them in your school, which is what my husband and I were told. Do not do that, because under federal and state law, they have a right to stay at that school of origin until a best interest determination is made. And this does include preschools and feeder schools. Feeder schools are when you're in elementary school and you're getting ready to go to middle school and it's summer and you're headed into middle school. You may have never set foot in that middle school door, but that's where you're going. That is their feeder school. That is their school of origin, even though they never went there. What is a best interest determination? This is the best way to sum it up. It's a collaborative meeting between schools, child welfare, and other relevant parties in a student's life to determine whether it is in the best interest of the student to remain in their school of origin or change schools. It's not a choice between the two. It's always, should the student stay at the school of origin? So it should be a really fair and unbiased decision-making process. And when I say that, it's because it's about the student. It's not about DCYF. It's not about a foster parent. It's not about a school. It's not what any of those people want. It's what's in the best interest of the student. We do have situations where schools will say, well, we're not going to do it. We're not going to take the student because we don't think it's in their best interest. Well, you can't just do that. It has to be a collaborative decision-making process. Everyone should have input. Not one person makes the decision. Everyone as a team makes that decision. It has to be held before you change schools. Don't change schools until this meeting happens. The only exception to that is if the school of origin is in Spokane, kids going there, and now because they couldn't find a foster home, they've moved them to Moses Lake into the middle of the state. Clearly, you're not going to transport 2 to 3 hours a day to go to school. So that's the only exception. If it's nearby, you need to have that best interest. They need to happen as quickly as possible. Every effort should be made to gather meaningful input from relevant and appropriate persons. If you click on that, there's a whole list of who those people are. Foster parents are one of them because they may have information. Students are one of them. If they're old enough, they should be at those meetings or at least asked for input for those meetings. We always don't know what's happening with these kids, right? So we all may be in a meeting saying, yeah, everything's great. They're doing great at that school of origin. We should just keep them there. But the kid may come to the meeting and say, hey, I'm scared to go to the school because every day I'm getting bullied, or, there's a safety issue, or I'm bored. I've done this work. I did this work at my previous school, and now I'm just like so bored because I'm not even having to hardly work at all. So there are those little things that the student may know that the adults in the meeting may not know. So it's important to have them there. Student center factors are all kinds of things, like, is there an IEP? Are they in special ed? Are they getting the services they need at the school of origin, or are they not getting those services met? Are there siblings at their school of origin? That's huge. If a sibling is at the school of origin, they want to be able to see their sibling every day if they're not placed with them, because they often get separated. So that's an important piece. So there's all these little important pieces to consider. So you might want to check those out. If it's decided that, yes, the student's going to stay in the school of origin, then both school districts are then responsible for transportation. And we're going to talk about transportation in a little bit. Here's kind of what happens. The student goes into foster care, changes placement. That constitutes a school zone or a school district change. If there is no school zone or district change during that move, then there's no need for best interest. It's only if there's a school zone or school district change. DCYF should let that foster care liaison know with a school notification form, or the foster care liaison will run a foster care report, which they have access to, and then they'll realize, hey, the student has moved or has gone into foster care. DCYF and the foster care liaisons from both districts will meet and work together to schedule that best interest determination. And then while all that happens, the student stays at the school of origin. This is what the school notification form looks like, just in case you've never seen one. If you're a caregiver, your name will be on here right here, caregiver name, address, email. And so that way the school has all that information about you. But this is what it looks like. I just wanted you to see it. Educational decisions, who should be making educational decisions? Is it you? Are you kinship, foster parent? Always it's the parent, unless the court has said, nope, parents should not be making any educational decisions right now. But parents should always be involved. And I know that's a little tricky when you're a foster parent. You don't want them to maybe know who you are. You don't want them to, maybe see you. And I totally understand that. That's something for the school to kind of navigate. Maybe they meet with a parent, maybe then they meet with you. But it's usually the parent. They have a right to continue to make educational decisions. We don't want to alienate them if the goal is to reunify. Caregivers, foster parents, kinship caregivers who have if there's a dependency, you guys can make a day-to-day educational decisions, and you can also serve as the parent in special education meetings and decisions. DCYF is also authorized to make day-to-day educational decisions, but they cannot serve as the special education decision maker. If you get a student with special education needs, there's resources to help you navigate that. Because if you're not familiar with IEPs or 504s, it's a little intimidating. It's a little scary. So students in foster care are entitled to immediate enrollment. So if it's determined the student's not going to stay at the school of origin, they're going to move to the new school, that enrollment is immediate. The other school district can't say, oh, we got to wait a while till we get, the immunization records and blah, blah, blah. Nope. Students in foster care are entitled to immediate enrollment. And that includes if, a student has moved from Spokane to Moses Lake and you're in Moses Lake and they've come to live with you and you know that you now have to take them to the new school because that best interest isn't really going to happen because the students move so far away, and you show up at the school and they say, oh, well, we can't have this until we do, some more research. Nope. Student is entitled to immediate enrollment, even without those records. And those records sometimes can be like there's a medical plan or there's medication. And so I included this little screenshot of our school and health nursing services here at OSPI, and you can always reach out to the school nurse. If you can't get information you need, you can go to our page here, and our nurse, the person who leads up our health and nursing services, Annie Hetzel, and she can answer any question you have. She's an expert. So I just included that. In child welfare, DCYF is broken into 6 regions. And the other piece of ESSA is that schools and OSPI must collaborate with child welfare. And this is how child welfare is handled in our state. There are 6 regions. Each region has someone called a regional education lead. And that's these people. These people work right with the foster care liaison. They'll schedule the best interests, but they're also really invaluable resources if you have questions. So maybe you're trying to find something out, or there's a problem and nothing's happening. You can't get the school district to respond, or the foster care liaison has gone on vacation for a week, or whatever the situation is. You can reach out to these leads and they can help you. They're really great at their job. I will say this isn't their only job. Like in schools, someone often carries 3 different hats and 3 different responsibilities. Same thing with these guys, but they're really great. Our state, it does not align with DCYF whatsoever. This is how our education is put into ESDs, educational service districts. So we don't always align. This is a different world than most of the education world that I work in. Everyone at OSPI goes by these maps. Those are the school districts and those are the ESDs. I function by DCYF region because that's just how I work. So I just wanted you to kind of see the map. Now, I mentioned earlier there are resources if you need help with these kiddos. Treehouse is a great resource. You as a caregiver cannot make a referral, but you can ask your social worker to make one. You can ask a CASA to make one. All our youth now are getting attorneys. You can ask the attorney to make one, and they can make a referral. So say you have a kiddo, you know the kiddo has special ed needs, but no one's ever done anything about it. They can't read, maybe they have dyslexia, maybe they have some kind of learning disability. Schools, they've moved around from school to school and they kind of fell through the crack a little bit. You could get someone to make a referral to Treehouse Ed Advocacy and say, hey, I need help getting this kid an IEP. And they can come in and help you do that or get you the resources to do that. And what they do is they kind of come in, they help with the problem, and then they leave. Then they're out. And they set the student up to be successful, and they work with caregivers very closely and try to explain everything to them. So this is a really good resource if you're a caregiver. Okay, we're about halfway done. I know I'm talking a lot, but hang in there. So this is kind of what our framework of support looks like. We have at DCYF, we have an education team, and that's Peggy Carlson and Terry Awoko. And Peggy and I work together a lot. Terry and I work together a lot. We're constantly communicating and collaborating. That's the education team at the headquarters. Headquarters is like, the top of DCYF. And then we have those regional ed leads. And then we have our school districts, and there is the liaisons, there's a building point of contact, and then there's me. I train the liaisons and building points of contact. They email me with questions. I work with them very closely. I love my liaisons and my building points of contact. They're all amazing people doing amazing work. So I'm so lucky to get to work with them. And then we have Treehouse, and we have that educational advocacy. And that's kind of our framework in our state of how we're supporting our students in foster care. Now, if you're a kinship person, if you're a kinship family, then I pulled this right off of DCYF. Keep your kinship child enrolled in and attending the school. That's called the School of Origin, where they were when they lived with their parents. And then if someone believes they need to go to a new school, you need to work with the caseworker. But like all other students, our students in kinship care should really stay at that school of origin. All right, so it's time to go back to school. I put back to school, but it may be the middle of the year. And so how do you get all that information that you need? Like I don't even know where to start. Sometimes we have people who, maybe are kinship providers and they've gotten, their niece or nephew and they don't have any kids themselves and they don't really know where to start. The good thing is we have this wonderful new thing called the internet. The internet has really great stuff, and it usually has a school website. So I always say, well, check the school website. Some are better than others. There's a lot of information on there. There could be a calendar, which is essential. Then you need to know what days the kids are going to go to school, what days they have early release. Often at the beginning of year, they'll have school supply lists on there or class lists on there. You can also go to the school. The school offices all should be back open now. Some of our schools start next week. Some of them start the week after or the week of Labor Day. But the offices are open, so just go to the school and find out what's happening. They usually have like school supply lists at the front desk, and what grade is your student in? Oh, third grade. Okay, here's what they need. You can also ask them for a tour. You could say, hey, we're new. I haven't been at the school before, and would you mind giving me and my new student that I have living with me a quick tour of the school? And that's really important, especially if the student is changing schools. It's so scary. I remember when I became a foster parent, I thought this is going to be so great. We had a brand new house. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and these kids are not okay. They're traumatized no matter how wonderful and nice and loving and caring you are. They're still going through a lot. They've still been taken from their family, and it's scary. And then now they're going to change schools. So it's really awesome if you could get in that school, and even before school starts, or if it's during the school year, maybe before or after school, get a tour so the kids kind of have in their head what it's going to look like. You can also ask to meet the teacher. And Washington, we're a local control state, and each district kind of determines on their own, well, they do determine on their own who needs to know about the student in foster care, who needs to know that the student is in foster care. And so they kind of decide that on their own. It's important for the teacher to also meet you because you're the caregiver. And so I think it's important for you to reach out to that teacher and talk to the teacher and let them know, hey, I'm the day-to-day decision maker, so please reach out if there's any problems. And then you can also reach out to DCYF. School supplies are spendy. You're talking school supplies, and you don't want to send a kid to school with no new clothes because that's a fun thing. And so, reach out to DCYF to see if there's any kind of additional support. Sometimes they'll have like a backpack program so the kids can get a new backpack. They may have extra school supplies. So, ask your caseworkers or any other resources because, you do get a little money as a foster parent, but, these kids need a lot of new things at the beginning of the year. So it could get a little bit overwhelming. If the student is, if there isn't the need for best interest, then you can contact the school and say, hey, we're going to need transportation for this student, and they can hopefully connect you with the person handling transportation to add you to a bus route. If you have a best interest, student's still going to stay at the school of origin or they're going to move, that's up to the foster care liaison. It's not your job to figure out transportation, just so you know. Here is an important piece to know. Do children in care have to attend public school, or can they be homeschooled, attend a private school, or an alternative school? And the answer is in the WAC. The WAC says homeschooling, private schooling, and alternative learning experience instruction, then that includes online learning, are prohibited for all children in the care and custody of the department unless improved by a court ruling. And that came about a few years ago to kind of protect our kids, because what happened was it was discovered that some foster parents were keeping children home and homeschooling them according to their religion, which didn't always suit the same religion of the child, how they were raised. And it was kind of becoming an issue. And also they wanted to make sure that there are lots of eyes on the kids. So you would have to get a court ruling, you'd have to get court approval to do any of those alternative learnings. All right, here's some of school entitlements we talked about a little bit already. The free lunch, DCYF pays those fees and fines, and they're entitled to transportation. Transportation, let's talk about it. All right. When the best interest determination determines students should stay in their school of origin, the student is entitled to the transportation to the school of origin. And that means then, so let's say student school of origin is school A, and now they live in school B area. Both districts are now responsible. It's not just the school of origin responsible for transportation. If it's determined they're going to stay at school A at their school of origin, then both districts now have to coordinate. And so sometimes those districts will get creative because the reality is we don't have enough bus drivers. We don't have enough routes. And so when we get a new foster care kids, there's a whole bunch of finagling that needs to happen to get these kids to school. So sometimes you may encounter this. A student may be bused to school from by one school district and bused home by another, or they'll meet in a Target parking lot and the kid will hop onto another bus, whatever. They get creative to get these kids to school, but they are entitled to transportation for the whole duration that they are in foster care. Again, like I just said, transportation isn't always immediate. They got to reroute. They might have to hire some more bus drivers. That could take a while. In the meantime, try to be patient, and if you can, help get the kid to school. I know DCYS will sometimes try to help get the kid to school, but it isn't going to be like, oh, overnight we're going to have transportation. They're going to show up in the morning. That's not going to happen because it does take a little bit of work to get this done. And then if you're having long delays, like they said, okay, we'll start transportation, on Thursday. And Thursday comes, Friday comes, nothing happens. You continue to get delays. Reach out to that foster care liaison. Working with school districts. Again, you want to make sure that you're maintaining confidentiality for these kids. You don't want to barrel into the school and announce, hey, Stacey's in foster care, where everyone can hear. You just want to continue to maintain that confidentiality for these kiddos. You'll want to know who is who, especially if you're not familiar with schools, who's the principal, who's the registrar or the school secretary. Is the student going to go to counseling at school? Who's the counselor? These are the kind of people you want to make sure you meet, talk to, build those relationships with them, build relationships with the people that are working with those kids. Again, find out those building points of contact, talk to them, reach out to the foster care liaison if you have any trouble. And if you have any trouble with any of this, I'm always here. I'm here to also help foster families and caseworkers. I get emails from DCYF caseworkers. I get emails from, nonprofits. I'm here to help anyone. So don't feel like you can't reach out to me. A lot of people think that if kids are in foster care, then they're homeless. They're not. That's just not. The programs used to be combined, but they're not anymore. So if someone says, oh, well, they're a McKinney-Vento student. Nope. They have housing. They have a place to put their head at night. They're not living in a car. They're not homeless. There's very few situations where they're both. And some of those are on this sheet, and you can access the sheet with the link right here. But some of them are maybe the students in foster care, they're a teenager, they hate their foster care placement, they run away, they're staying on friend's couch, but they're still technically in foster care. Caseworker may not be able to get a hold of them and get them stabilized, so they're kind of bouncing around. That in those situations, they're both. If a student is placed with a family, like maybe it's a kinship family and that family is really struggling, and they don't have safe, stable housing overnight, then they could still in kinship be considered homeless. So there are some crossovers, but if anyone, when you're working with schools, if anyone says, oh, they're foster care, oh, so they're also McKinney-Vento, no, they're not. They're foster care. Special education is a huge piece. About half of our kids, maybe a little less than half, are in foster care, are also special ed students. So this is just a little reminder if you're working with students in special education, there are all these laws around students in special education. They're called IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So there's a whole bunch of laws that go about that. There's a whole bunch of laws that we've just gone over about our students in foster care. Both of those laws are there for the student. They both go hand in hand to support them. Sometimes schools don't realize they're working with a student and they're caught up in like getting the IEP or getting an assessment done, and nobody knows that they're actually a foster care student, and then they say something like, well, we're going to move them to this other school because it's better. And then that's when you need to say, oh, just remember, students in foster care, we can't move them out of the school without certain processes and unless there's been a placement change. So just keep that in mind, because schools don't always know about our kids that they're also in foster care. If you do have a kid in foster care who also has an IEP, you can, as a caregiver, foster parent, serve as the parent in making those special education decisions. It's always the biological or adoptive parent has right first, but if the parent is not around or not available, you can serve as the parent. If you're going to do that, make sure you have a little bit of knowledge about IEPs, because big decisions are made in those meetings, and there are some resources out there that can help you, and you can always reach out to me and I can connect you with some people. You can reach out to our special education department at OSPI. They have a family resource person. There are people to help you. Just don't feel like you're alone. A DCYF caseworker cannot serve as a decision maker in special education decisions, and neither can Treehouse, just so you know. If they turn 18 and they're in extended foster care and in your home, and they're able to make those decisions, those rights actually transfer to the students and they can make those decisions. If you, as a caregiver or a foster parent, say this is too much, there's a lot of laws, I'm nervous about it, I don't know anything about it, you can let DCYF know and the school, and they can appoint a surrogate parent. They can either do that through the court. It will delay things a bit, but they can do it through the court. And then each school district has a process to appoint a surrogate that does not work for the school district, is an impartial person who can serve as that decision maker. So don't feel completely overwhelmed. There's also an organization called PAVE. I used to volunteer for PAVE, and they'll go to meetings with you. They'll go over the IEP with you. They're really, really great. So there are resources. You don't need to feel like you can't handle it. This is kind of the chart that we use with DCYF to kind of determine who the parent decision maker is in IEP cases. And you can, I'm not going to go through it. You can look at it when you get the PowerPoint, but this is what they're using to determine, and we created it together. So it's kind of an easy flow chart. So caseworkers should be using this. Like I said, we have special ed resources for you. Again, this is you can email our OSPI special education team. Usually takes sometimes a couple days to get a response. They're pretty busy. You can call them and leave a message. You can check out their website. I mentioned PAVE. PAVE is amazing. You can, contact them. They can help you. The Office of the Education Ombuds is through the governor, and those people that work in that office are amazing. They're very knowledgeable. They only serve certain students in our state, and luckily, foster care students are one of them. So you can reach out to them if you're having any kind of special ed or any other education issue. You can reach out to them, and they'll help you too. All right, now I'm going to kind of end on a sad note. This is why everything is important that I just talked about. We're going to look at what's happening with those kids. Remember, I said every time they move, they lose 4 to 6 months of academic gain. So are our kids going to school? Well, they're missing a lot of school. You can see the last data we have. Hopefully we'll have our 24-25 data soon, but the last data we have in 23-24, they were only going to school 58% of the time compared to 72% of the time for our non-foster care students. Foster care is purple and non-foster care is that teal green. So they're not going to school. This is defined as missing less than or having less than 2 absences a month. So they're clearly having a lot more absences. And I think that's because, they're getting moved around a lot. And then there's processes that have to happen. And yeah, we got to make sure they're going to school. And I'll be honest, I've heard from some, they don't want to go to school because they're embarrassed. Maybe they don't have nice shoes, especially our older kids, right? They're embarrassed. They don't have a nice coat. Their friends have phones. They don't have a phone. There are social things that prevent them from going to school too. How are they doing in school? Well, pretty bad. Pretty bad. Every time those school moves happen, they're missing chunks of academic learning. So, even if they're in 4th or 5th grade and they move school, and at their school that they're going to, their school of origin, they're learning multiplication. Then they're moved over to the other school, and in that school, they're in the midst of division. They haven't finished learning how to multiply, and now we expect them to just pick up division without any little extra support. And so they fall further and further and further behind. Schools are not teaching the same thing statewide at every school at every level. Every school is a little bit different. So it's really important to keep that in mind. So, reading, same thing. If they're younger and they're learning reading skills and they get moved and they've missed 6 units of reading skills, basic reading skills, they're not going to be able to do what they're doing at their new school reading. And you can see they're really far behind on, English and language arts. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about, we need to move this kid to a new school. This is why it's important to try to not to and keep them at that school of origin. They're also getting disciplined a lot. These kids are not bad kids. I mentioned I had a lot of tough kids in my home. I surely did. A lot of behaviors, a lot of angry kids. But why? Because they have a lot of trauma, right? Behavior is just a response to trauma. And so these kids are having a hard time. They're getting moved, they're to new homes, they're getting moved to new schools, and how are they responding through behaviors like I'm not gonna listen to this teacher because I'll probably get moved to a different school in 2 weeks, and so then they become defiant and then they get in trouble, they get disciplined. But our students in foster care have the highest discipline rate of any subgroup of students, including our homeless students. So this is not okay. And then at the end of the day, how are they doing when they graduate? Well, only 51% graduated in 23 and 24, compared to 82%, almost 83% of their non-foster care peers. So they're not graduating on time. And I mean, and all of those things we just saw, they're not going to school. They're really behind academically. They can't catch up. They're getting disciplined a lot, so they're missing school. And now we can't get them to graduate on time because they've faced all these different challenges. So this is how our kids are doing. Here are some resources. Again, you can find the foster care liaison, you can find your building point of contact, you can look at all of the state and federal laws I just mentioned. If you have a teenager, please, please, please help them prepare for post-secondary. Let's get them graduated and on to their life. You can find post-secondary resources. And then we have toolkits. We have a whole best interest determination toolkit if you're still like, I'm really confused by this process. You can go look at the best interest determination toolkit and it'll say, here's everything that needs to happen. I think I have like 12 or 13 documents in there. And it really explains who needs to be there, what are you supposed to be talking about. Here's like a sample agenda. So all that stuff is there for you to look at. And then if you are going to be helping them with post-secondary, here are some quick resources. Students in foster care, if they're in foster care on the day they turn 13, then they're eligible for some really good money. They're eligible for money through FAFSA, and they're eligible through money for like the Washington governor's scholarship. But they have to have been in foster care when they turn 13. They could literally turn 13 and then the next day get adopted and they'd still qualify. So something to keep in mind. All right, that's all I've got. This is my contact information. Call, email anytime. I also have a Savannah works with me. She's my program specialist. She's also very knowledgeable. You can email her, call her, but we are there for you guys. So I am going to stop sharing.